There is a fourth tradition of Christian reflection on war, an emerging tradition, about which you should know something. It's called just peacemaking theory. The language of just peacemaking has been affirmed in the official documents of a variety of Christian denominations in the United States and around the world, especially the United Methodist Church, the United Church of Christ, the Presbyterian Church, and to a lesser extent, the Roman Catholic Church. Three Christian thinkers have been prominent in the development of just peacemaking theory: Glenn Stassen, Dwayne Friesen, and John Langen. It's interesting that Stassen, Friesen, and Langen come from distinct backgrounds. Stassen is a Baptist. Friesen is a Mennonite, and of course the Mennonites are historically associated with a commitment to nonviolence or Christian pacifism. Langen is a Roman Catholic, and the Roman Catholic Church has historically affirmed just war theory. The fundamental claim made by those who advocate just peacemaking is this: all Christians have a fundamental obligation to promote justice and to seek peace. This, of course, is consistent with the claim that I have made that justice is a central theme of the Bible, and that those who seek to live in faithful relationship to God, as God is revealed in the Christian scriptures, should make the seeking after justice by meeting or responding to the needs of the poor and the oppressed a moral priority in their lives. A second important feature of just peacemaking theory is a focus on those policies and practices that promote justice and that enable peacemaking or conflict resolution. What the just peacemakers are convinced of is that there is a close relationship between justice and peace. Or rather, we might say, a close relationship between injustice, or the perception of injustice, and political conflict that results in war. Peoples and nations go to war very often out of an experience or a perception of having suffered some profound grievance or injustice. Where we are able to reduce the reality of injustice, we should be able to reduce the social and political tensions that often result in war. As you might expect, given the various backgrounds of the people who have developed just war theory, or just peacemaking theory, as you might expect, they leave largely unresolved the debate between just warriors and pacifists as to whether war is ever justified, and whether Christians can participate in war. From the perspective of the just peacemaking approach, that debate, seemingly irresolvable, is in fact a profound distraction. From the perspective of the just peacemakers, what both pacifists and just warriors ought to be able to agree on, and where their focus ought to be, is on the seeking after justice and the seeking after practices that reduce conflict and produce peace, long before the debate as to whether war is ever necessary becomes important. Those like John Langen, who come to just peacemaking theory from a just war perspective, tend to see just peacemaking as both correcting just war theory, or at least correcting a possible misuse of it, and as supplementing it. It corrects just war theory in this respect. Those who are committed to just war theory seem to focus their attention on whether or not war is justified in any particular situation of political disagreement and conflict. At its worst, just war theory is simply misused to justify war. The just peacemaking advocates say that just war theory can lead to the idea that our most important task as Christians is simply discerning what wars we can support and participate in, when in fact Much more significant, as I've already suggested, is what we can do to make war less likely. Long before we are asking, is this a good war, we should be asking, what can be done and what can we do to make this war unnecessary or unlikely? Put differently, from the just peace perspective, when we are asking about some particular war, it's because we have already failed as justice seekers and as peacemakers. Now, one might also see just peacemaking theory as supplementing just war theory, or filling in the gaps in just war theory. Just war theory says that war must be fought with a right intention, that is, intending a more just peace on the other side of the war or the violence. Just peacemaking theory asks how such an intention is made real in concrete actions and in public policy before a resort to war seems necessary. Just war theory says that war should be a last resort, that it must always be a last resort. Just peacemaking theory says, so what are the effective policies and practices that might be effectively employed to protect national security and promote the common good of nations and the peoples of a region or of the world before the resort to war is truly a last resort? Again, we might say it this way. Just peacemaking theory says to the just warriors, okay, you say war must be a last resort, but what have you offered as the potentially effective nonviolent alternatives to war that your own theory says must be considered, if not actually tried, before you can justifiably start the destruction and killing that are inherent in war? That's what just peacemaking theory attempts to do. Find out what those mechanisms might be that make war unlikely, that make peace a possibility, even before we must have to go to war to protect it or to find it. What about the relationship of just peacemaking theory to Christian pacifism? On the one hand, I would say that just peacemaking theory represents a profound challenge to those Christian pacifists who are disengaged from society, disengaged from the struggle against injustice, or from the attempt to create social, political, and economic arrangements that achieve justice within society. Just peacemaking theory says to such pacifists, don't think that you are fulfilling your Christian responsibility. Don't think that you are faithfully following Jesus simply by your refusal to kill or to participate in war. However noble and faithful that may be, it isn't enough. We must first and foremost be seekers after justice and active peacemakers. The Christian life is defined by what we are committed to, and not just or even primarily by what we reject. On the other hand, when one considers just peacemaking theory in detail, we will see that the actual policies and practices that the just peacemaking theory advocates are often drawn from the experiences of those Christian pacifists who are actively engaged. So in many respects, just peacemaking theory draws upon the experience of those liberal pragmatic pacifists and those redemptive witness pacifists of which we have spoken, those that are deeply engaged in the struggle against injustice and the pursuit of the common good. So what is the biblical and theological basis for a commitment to just peacemaking? Put differently, why do the Christian advocates of just peacemaking believe that Christians should make seeking justice and peace a priority in their lives? I want to say right away that in some respects that question is somewhat misleading with respect to the work of Stassen, Friesen, and Langen. Together, they have written an essay that includes an important section called, quote, a theological basis for just peacemaking, unquote. One of the interesting things that they say is that they are appealing to all people of goodwill to adopt peacemaking practices. And they acknowledge that people from other religious faiths, or with no faith at all, might have within their own belief systems a valid basis for adopting a commitment to just peacemaking. As Christians themselves, however, they discuss the reasons from the perspective of their Christian belief system and worldview for just peacemaking. Their comment is an interesting one and a reminder that all the moral perspectives we've been describing, crusade, pacifism, just war, can and have been embraced by those who are not Christians for their own reasons that might be quite different from the reasons that Christians offer for thinking about the moral challenge of war in the way that they do. So why do the Christian advocates of just peacemaking believe that seeking justice and peace should be a priority? Stassen, Friesen, and Langen discuss that under three headings, which they label initiatives, justice, and love and community. Take a look at each of those categories as shown here. In our next presentation, we'll look at each of these theological bases for the just peacemaking approach in much greater detail. Keep in mind, however, these fundamental characteristics of the just peacemaking approach. The just peacemakers affirm a fundamental Christian obligation to seek justice and to be peacemakers. They focus on those policies and practices that have proven effective in the reduction of those social and political and international tensions that result in war. The approach is grounded in a conviction that there is a close relationship between justice and peace, or between injustice and war. And so they focus on reducing those tensions in societies among nations that sometimes, indeed often, lead to war. Just peacemakers leave unresolved the debate between pacifist and just warriors as to whether war is ever justified, or Christians may participate in war. The focus for the just peacemaker is on those practices and policies that make war less likely. We may disagree then, once those policies and practices have proven ineffective or failed. But despite that possibility, our focus should be on policies and practices that produce a just peace.